Okay.
So, hi everyone. Thank you for coming on a Sunday morning. I know it's very difficult. It's difficult for me as well. So, today we are going to talk about the credential manager that Android introduced a while back. How to authenticate users using passkeys and passwords and other traditional systems that are out there to authenticate users. Before we start, a little bit about myself. So I'm Priya. I am senior Android developer and I have around 8 years of experience. I'm a technical blogger, a public speaker, and I love to code. And my main interest of domain lies in Kotlin, but yeah, I also work on Flutter apps as well. So a quick go through of what we will be talking about. So in the first half, we will be talking about a bit about what are passkeys, how they associate with the credential manager, and how they work on behind the scenes. And on the second part, we'll be talking about the credential manager, which is Google's Android API, which gives Android developers access to use passkeys to authenticate their users. And then we'll be talking about how Credential Manager works with the passkeys and FIDO Alliance and how it goes around to authenticate users. So, what is passwordless authentication? Can anyone tell me what is authentication, passwordless? Anyone, just a random thought.
Very better activity.
But how to verify the users? Like passwordless authentication, like what is it exactly?
I will bring to the community.
Sorry?
I will already if the not this like it's the being that
Yes. So, passwordless authentication, as the name suggests, is an authentication that is done without the user having to feed their password or go through the OTP verification screen or other such methods that we usually use to, log in the user to our app. So, passwordless authentication basically is that it gives the developers, us developers, a provision to give access to users in our app without having to, going through remembering their passwords as well as asking them to remember their passwords. So, how many of you have passwords as 1234? Right? And how many of you have passwords 12345678? I do that, right? It is not safe, by the way, so change your passwords. So we have this tendency, users have this tendency to have very simple passwords for the sites or the apps that are not much relevant or, which they feel are safe to, even if they get accessed by other users, it's okay. So we have this tendency as humans, to have a very small password, because nowadays in this era of social media, we tend to have multiple accounts on multiple apps and God knows how many social media apps, like thread आया, Instagram तो था, फिर thread आया, अभी Twitter था तो Mastodon आ गया, and it's all a hassle, right? So this is where passwordless authentication comes into picture, where your keys, your passwords are safe in a way that passkeys enable that particular thing. So passkeys are a replacement for passwords, where your users can log into your app or your website, that particular domain, from any device for an array of devices, whether you're using your phone, whether you're logging on the Chrome browser, whether you're using your Safari browser, or whether you're using your tablets. So there is only one passkey for one app or one website, and you can use it throughout multiple devices that you access on a daily basis. So let's say I put a LinkedIn post via my browser, and I want to make sure that, I want to check how that post goes on, or how many, replies I got from that particular post. So I'll be just quickly logging into my LinkedIn from my mobile and see it on the go. So that is passkeys. While it gets started, I think I hope everyone can see my screen. Is this visible to everyone?
Okay.
So why do we need passkeys? Anyone Why do we need passkeys? Why do we need passwordless authentication? If anyone can help me with that.
Listen, follow me.
Right? Any other answer? No answers, nothing jumps to your mind? Okay. So, as I said, simplifying the password so that you don't have to ask your users to remember the passwords. You don't have to remember the passwords for your users. You don't have to deal with OTP authentication or phone authentication. Use Firebase, Supabase and everything, or, have your server doing this feature for you. So that one-click solutions, like in these days, we all know that, young people do not go through the hassle of filling up the registration form or filling up the sign-up form. And, they are too lazy to do that, to be honest. So to give them a one-click solutions where, the users can just click on one button and that's it. They are logged into your app in a very secured manner. So that is where passkeys are important to enable this kind of audiences that you'll be getting. And these days, we are going to get this kind of audiences only. So passkeys are also a digital credential. That means that passkeys are a public key encrypted entity, which is a digital certificate. So you need not worry about the security of your users or that data. Or this is, in a way, passkeys are a way of representing to your users that, okay, your login is going to be safe with us, your details are going to be safe with us, and nobody is going to use phishing attacks to, get your data or sign in as you. Because passkeys is essentially an encrypted digital certificate which works on public-private key process of, dealing with saving the data. Passkeys, again, as I said, are safer because no one can easily encrypt them. Then if you give one-click solutions to your users, they are going to be happy. Because as we know, the Gen Z people are not very good at, doing all that stuff, going through the hassle of filling up the forms. So your users are happy and your developers are happy because they don't have to, deal with OTP authentication, remembering the password, checking the password on the server and, all those stuff. So your users are happy, your developers are happy. And so it's a win-win situation, and that is why passkeys come into picture. So to enable passkeys in Android developers have come up with a solution, and that is Credential Manager. So Credential Manager is Android's API, which enables you to log in your users into your Android apps, either using the passkeys or the traditional login methods like login with Google, login with Apple, or traditional username password method. So that is where Credential Manager comes into picture. And in next, we will be seeing how Credential Manager actually works. First, I'll show you the flow of how Credential Manager works with the passkeys and your server to enable the user login and registration. And then we'll see a quick user interface, a demo interface of how actually that is processed, so that you can get a clear idea of, how actually your app is going to look like when you introduced Credential Manager into your app. So when your user comes to the app, first of all, you need to create a passkey for your new user. So if there is some new user into your app, coming to your app, then you need to ask that user about creating a passkey. And you need to form a UI in a way that they are assured that these passkeys are something which is very safe and very seamless method of login into your app. So this is where you guide your users to create a passkey. Once the users understand what passkeys are and why they would be beneficial to them, then you can go ahead and ask their permission to create a credential or create a passkey for your app. And that we call from the Create Credential Manager that is there in the Credential Manager API. In that you give a request and an activity. Before we create credential, we need to ask our users for permission from them, take permission from them, whether they want to create a passkey for your app or not. To do that, we can use the biometric authentication that is there on our phones, whether it's a pattern, whether it's a pin, or whether it's a fingerprint, or whether it's a face detection. You can use that biometric authentication in your app and verify that this is the user, this particular device's user, and this user who is authenticating is giving us the right to the accounts that are already saved with the Google Password Manager that is available on the Android devices. So currently, till Android 13, Google's Password Manager is the authenticator service that is going to be used with Credential Manager. From Android 14 onwards, there is going to be third-party authenticators as well introduced. So we have a few companies that are coming up with this, but for that you need Android 14. But otherwise, it's Google's Password Manager, which takes care of creating the credentials, storing the credentials, and then interacting with the user in your app, or interacting with the with your app to store the passwords conveniently on the user's devices. So once the user gives you a heads up about using their credentials to create the passkey, then the credential manager will create the passkeys, and then the credential manager will take in something. Let's say it calls your backend, and your backend gives them again a JSON request. That JSON request is linked with digital assets links. It will give you a challenge. It will give you user ID, username, display name, and other such things, which according to the Fido Alliance is a very long list. You need to store all those in your backend or on your server, and then your server will give that request JSON to the credential manager, and then it will create the credential. And once it creates the credential, it gives you back the public key and the private key of the credential or the passkey that is created for your app's user. Now, the private key is kept with the Google Manager, Password Manager on the user's device or associated with the user's account, and their public key is sent back to your server or your backend where you store the public key. So in order to use the private key, you will be requiring the public key, and that public key is secured with your backend, and that private key is secured with your user's account in the password manager. In our case, it's going to be Google Password Manager. So this is how the public and private key are associated with creating the passkeys or creating the credentials. Now, once the credentials are created, you need to sign in your passkey or your users via the passkey. So as I said, your backend is going to give them a certain JSON file, which is going to have a challenge. Challenge is nothing but a 16-byte long string, which is unique to every user and which is created on the go from your server, and it is linked with that particular user. So that is the challenge. Then again, that is going to be a relying party, which is again, being handled by your server. And then there is going to be user ID, which is also unique, username, display name, and so on and so forth, an authenticator, and so on and so forth. So this is in regards to the Fido Alliance. Fido Alliance is an organization which handles these public key prototypes or norms, to be specific. So you can go ahead and check Fido Alliance to get more details about this. But this is in general a nutshell of how it works. So the password is sent back to the credential manager, and then the credential manager again checks whether the challenge is or whether the relying party, the user ID and everything matches up with the user that is trying to log in, and they authenticate the user, and then they send back the credential to your app. Now, if the sign in is going to be via passkeys, then the credential manager will send back a private key for your users, and then your server can go ahead and check that public key and private key and check whether it matches or not. If your users are logged in with the traditional username and password method, then the credential manager is going to give your app these particular credentials, the username and the password, and then your app can go ahead and check this, whether this is in line with whatever I have with my password manager. And then if everything goes okay, they will check the server. They will check whether your server, your backend is having this kind of user or not, and then they can go ahead and sign in your users. While all of this is taking place, your user has to click only one button for all these things. When user clicks one button, your app is going to perform everything with the help of credential manager and going to do everything behind the scenes. So your users are out of the hustle of, dealing with all this chain of events that is going on in the backend. So this is the magic of credential manager. So enough of the talk. We are all developers, and as long as we don't see code, we are not that much satisfied. At least I am not satisfied if I don't see much code. So first and foremost, in Android, you will need a dependency. And to add the dependency, you need to add the credentials Android X dependency. And if everything goes well, you need to check whether Android 13 is the device that Android is using, the user is using as Android 13 or Android 14. And accordingly, according to the target SDK that you are having in your project, you can use this Play Services dependency, which is, needed for backwards compatibility, where, you are also giving support to the users that are using Android versions that are below Android 14. So you'll be needing this. Once done, you can create the credential manager. It's quite simple. Then, as I said, you need to request a credential, or you need to, first of all, you need to register the user with your app. And to do that, you need to request the credentials from the credential manager. For that, you pass a request JSON to your credential manager. And that request JSON, as I said, will contain the relying party, the challenge, the user ID, the username, the display name, and everything. And that request JSON, once you get it back from your server, you're going to pass it to the credential manager, and then the credential manager is going to create the passkey for you. And then in return, it will give you the public and private keys. The private key will be stored automatically by the credential manager with the help of Google Password Manager, and stored into the Google Password Manager. And the public key you can send to your backend, and your backend will take care of, saving the public key and all that. While this seems simple, the private and public key are encrypted, so that even if people get hold of your private key, or even if your server and your app both are hacked, so even if the phishing attacker might get hold of the private and public keys, it will still be very difficult for them to get the user details, or get into your app's using this user details, because the keys are encrypted. And this is all done via the credential manager. You don't have to manage that by your end. But once you call the create credential manager, the credential manager is going to take care of this for you. So once your user is registered, you need to sign in the user. And to do that, if you're using traditional username and password method, then you simply have to call get password option. And if you're using a public key, passkey, then you will be calling the get public key credential option. Again, you have to pass in the request JSON, which, your user clicks on a button, let's say sign me up. So it will show users a list of accounts that they would be dealing with. Like, you would be having multiple Gmail accounts. So your user will be selecting the Gmail account which they want to use a passkey for. And then according to that Gmail account, you are going to get the request JSON from your server, and then it is going to give you a public key credential. Once you get the credential, you can again check whether the written credentials verify with your backend data or not. You are going to have a database of users, so you are going to check whether the credential or the public key or the password that the credential manager is returning to you is actually there on your server or not. And once you verify that, then you log in your users. Again, this is a very simple code, and this is actually the only code that you'll be needing to use this thing on your Android app. So on your server side, you need to deal with the other things as well. But for Android apps, this is the only thing that you will be writing as developers, and of course, handling the sign in and sign up later on. But overall, this is how, you get a gist of what you will be needing to do. So let's say your users have logged in out of your app, and you need to see whether this is an existing user or whether this is a new user. and you need to have something to know whether this is a new user or whether this is an existing user. So accordingly, you can show them either the register button or the sign in button. So for that, there is a method called as prepare get credential, which will return you whether this particular user or whether this particular passkey is there for this particular Gmail account or not. If it is not there, the result will be going to be in that way, or if the user is new, then the request is going to be such that you will be at least knowing that okay, the user is not in my system, so I need to create the passkey and I need to ask permission from the user to create the passkey. Else, if it is an existing user, then I just need to ask the user to put a thumb on their device and then just log them in and take them to the home page. So this is how you can check whether the user is an existing user or not. So as promised, this is a basic UI of how your app is going to look like when your users are going to sign in to your app. Register in your app. So this is a sign up page where the user will fill up the minimal requirements that your app needs for the details of the users. And then when they click on sign up with a passkey, now there would be some users in your app which won't go for the passkey because they won't be understanding what the passkey is, or they would be too scared to have this kind of a digital entity. And if it's my father, he is always going to have a password and write it down in the diary. So there are two types of users. So for that, you also need to give users other options as well, that okay, it's okay if you don't want to use passkeys for my app, you can simply go ahead and feed in your password and then store it in your mind or in your diary or whatever. So you need to give users that luxury as well, and for that reason we have sign up with a passkey or other options. So that will give your users an option. And if you don't give this, then the traditional users who would not be very trusting towards the passkey, then you will lose such users. So in order to retain both kind of users, it's very important to give such options to your users. So once the user selects sign me up with a passkey, then the credential manager is going to show them a list of Gmail accounts or the accounts that are already there on the device, and they are going to tell them that okay, these are the accounts for which account do you want to create the passkey. And if you see that create passkey for your app, so this is also something which the credential manager judges by itself and gives your users an option to create, create passkey, as it is going to say use passkey. We will come to that later. But once the user selects the account that they want to create the passkey for, they will select it. You need to authenticate the user in some way, so you'll be using the phone's default biometric. Once the user feeds in the biometric, they are into your app, and that is all. Whatever story that we saw earlier, it is going behind the scenes around these 4 screens itself. So your developers are going to need to design only these 4 screens, and that's it. Your user is into your app in a very seamless manner, in a very secure manner. So this is a flow where you log in your users into your app. So once they select sign in, they are going to ask you use the saved passkey for your app. So they are going to select users. A user might have 2 accounts from two different Gmail IDs. So you are going to have a list of it, and then you are going to ask the user to use any one of these. So they will select it, they will again authenticate themselves, and then they are into your app. That's it. So essentially, this is the only flow that your designers are going to worry about, and all the backend stuff is going to be taken care of by the credential manager themselves. Now, this is just for Android app. What if your users, you want to give access to your users in Chrome OS, or Mac OS, or Linux OS, or on a tablet, or in Safari, or in Chrome, or in Firefox? So for that, Credential Manager, once it creates the passkey and saves that passkey with Google's Password Manager, Google's Password Manager is also going to be available in all these browsers, and in Chrome it is going to be there by default. So when you try to log in to your website, this is an app, but what if your users are going to log into the website? Then when they go to the website, you can just ask them to scan a QR code which is generated by the Google Password Manager. And once you scan it via your mobile device, your Android device, then all the authentication is going to be done there itself by the Google Password Manager, and then your user is logged into the website themselves. So this is an interoperability between two different devices or two different sources of the signing in can be there when you want to try to give your users access to everywhere, from everywhere. So this is essentially how this works. And it is so easy that we finished the talk in half an hour. It's that easy as that. So yeah, so this is a blog which I have written for the Credential Manager, where you can find the source code and everything related to this. So if you have any doubts, you can go ahead and check this link and get started with it. But yeah, this is it. If you have any doubts about the blog or anything, you can simply tell me, or there is a demo project which you can, use by yourselves. Directly, you can get the demo project from the GitHub, and you can create your own Credential Manager app. It's a very simple app, but you'll get the gist of how it works. So that's it. This is where you can contact me on social media. Anyone have any doubt regarding this Credential Manager or something like that? Any doubts, any questions, any blank areas which I have still not covered?
But the key deals with like this, the password manager will also particular threats too. Now, in order for their password manager to work on website, the websites should have everything where it goes linked.
Yes. So there is something called as digital asset linking. That is the JSON. So that JSON you register, which will hold the domain of your app. So it is going to connect that particular website to your app. So that is what is needed to be done on the backend side, to link the app to the website. And that is how the password manager will know. Okay, any other questions?
Yes. Okay, so we are using on zeroing around college application. So here, making user experience the sign on zero results and we prefer sign the customer. So for that, the key use with Google Credential Manager. So connect create account with audio in the field about or you will not or the commit go out in height to the page.
If you have username and password getting fed on it, I don't know exactly what you're doing, but you can then introduce this on top of Auth0. Or I know that Credential Manager supports sign in with Google and sign in with other traditional methods like Facebook or something, etc. You can use that. But if you have a password and a username, that you can introduce this on top of that.
Requires you particular effects rather than other option.
Security under the hood, Google's password manager is going to work. So essentially, your Android devices are already dealing with that. So if you see my blog, I've given steps about how you can navigate to see the stored credentials on your device. So you can just check how that Google Password Manager actually stores your credentials. So if you are using passwords, then you can actually see the password. So, and that is a very secured way. So number one, that is safer. As I said, it depends on public, private key, digital asset. So, and everything is going to be encrypted. So this is much safer. So if you heard about the Zomato engineering blog, if you saw that, you can see that Zomato was compromised by phishing attacks and all the user data got leaked. So even if your data is leaked in this way, so let's say you are using passwords instead of passkeys and your server is somehow hacked and your passwords are gone out, then how devastating that could be. You can't even imagine, your user's passwords going to someone else and they can use it in any way they wish. So this is a much safer way, and this is a Google API. So unless and until we are worried about Google accessing it, I think we are good to go.
Yes. Well, so is there like very associated with this passing getting?
No, it can go on. It can go on. You can have multiple passkeys per user, but it's throughout. So even if you're losing your device, your passkey is going to be the same for that account. Or whether you're transitioning from an old device to a new device, your passkey is still going to be there. So you just need the biometric authentication to work, and that's it. The password manager is going to take care of all these things.
Let's say do Google second, right? Or sign up with your. After signing, you going by the classical methods that we have in place. So after signing, you do the Google, we get a token from then, and using that token, we can fetch the user inventory. As far as I'm correct token knowledge, but that token also has an expiry as well. When it is somewhere around 45 to 60 days. Now let's say if the parenting said that we can use this conventional signing method, this traditional back to the let's say with those tokens expiry comes in, then will this be taken care of by the traditional manager except for we can go for any audition?
That's a very good question. Even I don't know the answer to that. So under the hood, how it works, I don't know, because I have not explored that part. That's a good question. You can add it in feedback, their official documents. So any other doubts?
I think in Auth0, but I use Auth0, so I know how this works. Like, you automatically have a refresh token being set like those accessible directions of we have to take care of it. Yeah, Auth0 you can finally go and set how much toggle what the person last all over the access room. Gives that expanding. So I suspect better something except the scholar.
Maybe the entity is Google, so it will collaborate with both of these APIs. I don't know, but that's a very good question.
Say something that good master managers probably the best time for the thinking about it. And also
No. From Android 14 onwards, you as an app developer can opt for using another password manager apart from Google Password Manager. So till Android 13 you don't have that option, but from Android 14 you can have that option. And there are a few companies who are introducing their own password manager because you never know with Google. So yeah.
Having tested this Credential manager, have we need specific edge over the existing or the previous mechanisms that are every
Less hassle.
we have this product called as OPPS that was developed standard by the Congress of the product data. So what edge does this app over?
Like I said, it's much safer. And passkeys are something which is going to revolutionize the way your authentication is going to do. So passkeys is something, according to FIDO Alliance, like it is something huge. And it is much safer, and we need to make sure that we are safer, because as the technology is advancing, we never know what kind of phishing attacks we'll be getting. Man-in-the-middle attacks are so out there. So any other questions? Okay, so if you still have any questions, you can contact me or see my blog and follow. There are other resources as well that you can find in my blog, where you can, go ahead and check how exactly this works.
On behalf of the students, could you please show us a quick glimpse, like how did that integrate in the code about any
Code, I just showed some code.
like suppose if I painted a start from scratch and if I respond to you make that thing on the very first. So could you
Yeah, the link which I said here. So this blog is going to have my open source project, which is there on GitHub. So, you can check all the code over there. It's a very layman code. I have specifically kept the code very layman to make people understand what it exactly is. So you will get a gist of it from the GitHub repository. It's quite simple.
This that anybody has paid in that stuff.
Okay, thank you. So there is still one more announcement. I think switch her. So there is still one more announcement. We are going to host a International Women's Day event organized by GDG Baroda and WTM Baroda. So we'll be having it on 10th of March. So this is the RSVP link. If you can just go and register with it, at least open it and then you can register it later on. But please do register. The event is going to be huge. There is an amazing speaker lineup, and the theme is going to be impacting the future. So it will be something related to future, something related to where the technology is advancing. So you guys can go ahead and RSVP on this link and make sure that you join us for the IWD event. You'll be getting all the details in the link itself.